Somewhere over the Pacific Northwest, a man is about to disappear, not into hiding, not into prison, into the sky itself. He boarded a plane as a passenger. He left it as a legend. And to this day, no one knows who he was. It was November 24th, 1971, the day before Thanksgiving. A man in a dark suit and a black tie approached the Northwest Orient Airlines counter in Portland, Oregon. He bought a one-way ticket to Seattle. He paid cash. He gave the name Dan Cooper. He was calm, polite, unremarkable. Nobody looked twice. He sat in the back of the plane, away from the other passengers. He ordered a bourbon and soda, paid for it, tipped the flight attendant. A normal man on a normal flight, except for what was inside his briefcase. Flight 305 took off at 2:50 p.m. 36 passengers, a routine trip, 45 minutes in the air. Nobody expected anything. 30 minutes into the flight, the man in seat 18C handed a note to the flight attendant, Florence Schaffner. She assumed it was a phone number. She slipped it into her pocket without reading it. He leaned over and whispered, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." Florence read it. Her hands went cold. The note said he had a bomb in his briefcase. He wanted $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a refueled plane, or everyone on board would die. Florence kept her voice steady. She walked to the cockpit. She did not run. She did not scream. She handed the note to the captain and said 4 words. "We have a situation." The pilots radioed Seattle. Seattle called the FBI. The FBI called the airline. Within minutes, a decision was made. They would comply. The plane circled Seattle for 2 hours while the FBI scrambled to gather the ransom. $200,000 in used $20 bills. 10,000 notes. The serial numbers were photographed and recorded, every single one. The 4 parachutes were loaded, 2 military chutes, 2 civilian sport parachutes. The passengers were told there was a mechanical problem. They sat. They waited. They had no idea. One passenger later said the man in the back seemed completely relaxed, reading a magazine, finishing his second bourbon, like a man waiting for a bus. When the plane landed in Seattle, D.B. Cooper released all 36 passengers and most of the crew. He kept the captain, the first officer, the flight engineer, and 2 flight attendants. He kept the money too. He ordered the plane to take off again. Destination, Mexico City. Low altitude, slow speed. Flaps partially extended. The pilots knew what that meant. He was going to jump. The plane climbed into the dark sky. Rain was falling. The temperature was dropping fast. At 7:40 p.m., flight attendant Tina Mucklow noticed something. The rear door indicator light had changed. Cooper had lowered the aft stairs. She walked toward the back of the plane. He told her to go back to the cockpit and stay there. She was the last crew member to see him. At 8:13 p.m., somewhere over the dark forests of southwestern Washington, between the cities of Ariel and the Lewis River, the pilots felt a slight bump. Then nothing. He was gone. Into the dark. Into the storm. Into nothing. The plane landed in Reno, Nevada. FBI agents swarmed it. D.B. Cooper was gone. 2 parachutes were still on board. He had taken 1 military chute and 1 civilian sport chute. The search began immediately. Hundreds of agents, military helicopters, ground teams combing through some of the most remote and unforgiving terrain in America. Dense forest, steep ravines, rivers running cold and fast. They searched for weeks. Nothing. No body. No parachute. No bag of money. No footprints. No campsites. No witnesses. Just miles of dark forest and silence. The FBI launched one of the longest investigations in American history. Over 800 suspects investigated over 5 decades. His description was remarkably ordinary. Medium height, around 6 feet tall, dark hair, mid-40s, dark sunglasses, a neatly pressed dark suit, 2 bourbon and sodas during the flight, calm the entire time. One flight attendant said he seemed almost sad, like a man who had already made peace with whatever was coming. Another said he was polite throughout, never raised his voice, never threatened anyone directly. He said please and thank you. A gentleman hijacker, if such a thing existed. The FBI's working theory was that he had some knowledge of the area, some experience with parachutes, some understanding of how airlines operated. He knew about the aft stairs, a feature most passengers never thought about. He was not a random madman. He was prepared. In 1980, 8 years after the hijacking, a boy named Brian Ingram was on a family camping trip along the Columbia River, about 30 miles northwest of Portland. He was 9 years old. He was digging in the riverbank, the way children do. looking for nothing in particular. His fingers touched something in the wet sand. He pulled out 3 bundles of disintegrating $20 bills, rubber bands still around them, water damaged, partially decomposed, but real. His father checked the serial numbers against the FBI list. They matched. It was D.B. Cooper's money, but only $5,800 worth, a tiny fraction of the $200,000. The bundles had not been buried deliberately. The FBI concluded they had washed downstream over years, carried by the Columbia River system from somewhere upstream, from somewhere in the wilderness. But where? And what happened to the rest? And what happened to him? The discovery raised more questions than it answered. If he had survived the jump and escaped, why was the money in the river? Did he drop it during landing? Did he panic and abandon it? Did he die near water and the money washed away while he did not? Nobody knows. The theories never stopped. Theory 1. He died in the jump. The weather was brutal that night, -7 degrees Celsius, driving rain, 0 visibility, dense forest below. He was jumping blind with no survival gear and a suit that offered no protection. The odds of surviving were almost impossibly low. Most FBI agents who worked the case believed he was dead within hours of jumping. Theory 2. He survived. He was too prepared to be reckless. He chose his seat deliberately. He knew the aircraft. He knew the terrain. He asked for 4 parachutes, which some investigators believe was a tactic to ensure he received working civilian chutes rather than sabotaged military ones. A man that careful does not jump without a plan. Theory 3. He survived but never spent the money. The recorded serial numbers made the bills impossible to spend without detection. Maybe he buried it. Maybe he burned it. Maybe he lived out the rest of his life as a normal man, carrying a secret too dangerous to ever tell. Over the decades, more than a dozen men confessed on their deathbeds to being D.B. Cooper. One of the most serious suspects was Robert Rackstraw, a former Army paratrooper and convicted criminal with a history of fraud, theft, and impersonation. He matched the physical description. He had parachute training. He was in the Pacific Northwest at the time. The FBI investigated him for years. In his final years, a private team claimed to have found coded messages in Cooper's letters pointing to Rackstraw as the hijacker. But DNA from a tie Cooper left on the plane did not match Rackstraw. The FBI closed that chapter. Another suspect, a man named L.D. Cooper, was identified by his own niece in 2011. She said he had confessed to her before his death. She said he matched the description. She had photographs. The FBI tested DNA from the family. It did not match the evidence from the plane. The tie. That black clip-on tie is the only physical evidence that ever came from the man himself. It sits in an FBI vault today. It has been tested multiple times. The DNA profile exists, but no match has ever been found in any database. Just a tie and a legend. D.B. Cooper changed aviation history forever. Within a year of the hijacking, the FAA required all commercial aircraft to install a device that would prevent the aft stairs from being lowered in flight. It became known informally as the Cooper Vane. New security measures were introduced. Passenger screening became stricter. The age of walking onto a plane with a briefcase and a note was over. One man's crime reshaped how millions of people fly every single day. And he never knew it, because he was already gone. In 2016, after 45 years, the FBI officially suspended active investigation of the case. Not solved, not closed, suspended. The case file remains open. The evidence sits in storage. The DNA profile waits for a match that has never come. Over the decades, the story became something larger than a crime. Movies were made, books were written. A town in Washington called Ariel holds an annual D.B. Cooper festival. People dress up. They celebrate the man who beat the system and vanished. Not a victim, not a hero. Something stranger than both. A ghost with a name that wasn't even his real name. D.B. Cooper didn't just commit a crime. He created a mystery that has outlived every investigator who worked the case. He jumped from a plane in a storm, in the dark, over one of the most remote forests in America, with $200,000 strapped to his body, and he was never seen again. Somewhere, there is a grave in the wilderness that no one has ever found, or a quiet man who lived a long, ordinary life and smiled every November when the anniversary came around. Somewhere, there is a person who knows the truth, a child who found something in a parent's belongings, a friend who was told a secret in a dying man's final hours, a name written in an old journal somewhere in a forgotten box. But after 50 years of searching, we still don't know his name. If this is the kind of mystery that keeps you up at night, you're in the right place. Subscribe, because the truth is always darker than the story.